Most Americans first heard of the Ozarks from a Netflix show about a financial advisor laundering money for a drug cartel. Good show, but a terrible introduction to a place that has been keeping secrets for 12,000 years. Because the real Ozarks make that fiction look tame. Masked vigilantes in devil horns lynching men from tree limbs. An entire county that lost 2/3 of its population in a single war. Communities drowned under a lake so a power company could sell electricity to St. Louis. And a folk magic tradition so dark that one researcher had to live among the locals for 20 years before anyone trusted him enough to whisper a word of it. This is the real history of the Ozarks, and nobody on Netflix is going to tell it to you. So let's go back, way back. 14,000 years ago, long before anyone called this place the Ozarks, nomadic hunters were already sheltering in its limestone bluffs and cave systems. These were not just passing through. They stayed. They carved petroglyphs into the rock. They built burial mounds along the rivers. For thousands of years, civilization unfolded in a landscape most Americans could not point to on a map. By the time Europeans stumbled into the region, the Osage Nation controlled everything. And I mean everything. Their territory stretched from the Missouri River down through present-day Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. French missionaries who encountered them in the 1600s described them as the tallest people in North America, some standing over 7 feet and among the fiercest warriors on the continent. The painter George Catlin backed that up. The missionary Isaac McCoy called them uncommonly fierce and courageous, and the finest-looking people he had ever seen. The Osage were not just living in the Ozarks, they owned them. Then came the French, who gave the region its name, probably from the French phrase Ozark, meaning at the Arkansas people. They built a few trading posts, trapped beaver, and did not cause too much trouble. The real damage started after 1803, when the United States bought the whole region in the Louisiana Purchase and immediately started pushing the Osage off their land. In 1808, the Osage were forced to sign a treaty ceding over 52 million acres, nearly all of what is now Missouri. William Clark of Lewis and Clark fame helped negotiate that treaty. He would later regret it. The Osage did not go quietly, but smallpox did what diplomacy could not. 2,000 Osage died in a single epidemic. By 1872, the survivors were removed to a reservation in Oklahoma, and the highlands that had been theirs for centuries were suddenly open for settlement. And the people who filled those hills? They came from Appalachia. Scots-Irish families from Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, and the Carolinas loaded their belongings into ox carts and pushed west. They brought their fiddle music, their whiskey stills, their distrust of outsiders, and their Presbyterian stubbornness. The Ozarks felt like home because it basically was. Same rocky ridges, same isolation, same attitude. Some of these families settled so deep into the hollows that their communities didn't get electricity until 1969. The same year, humans walked on the moon. If you're learning things you never expected, consider hitting subscribe. It takes 1 second, and it helps stories like this reach more people. Now here's where the Ozark story gets genuinely terrifying. The Civil War hit the Ozarks like a meat grinder. Missouri was a border state, and the Ozarks sat right on the fault line between Union and Confederate sympathies. But this wasn't a war of marching armies and grand battles. This was neighbor killing neighbor in the woods. Bushwhackers, guerrillas, and criminal gangs roamed the hills, stealing livestock, burning homesteads, and murdering anyone on the wrong side. Taney County, Missouri, went from a pre-war population of 3,500 people to fewer than 1,000 by the time the guns stopped. 2 out of every 3 residents either died or fled. When the surviving Confederate veterans came home, they found their land confiscated, their right to vote stripped away, and their farms occupied by Union newcomers who had swooped in to buy the land cheap. The war was over. The killing was not. By the 1880s, lawlessness in the Ozarks had become so extreme that a Union veteran named Nat Kinney decided to handle it himself. He organized 13 men on a treeless hilltop called Snap's Bald and formed a vigilante group that would become known as the Bald Knobbers. Within a few years, they had 900 members across 3 counties. They lynched suspected criminals without trial. They left bundles of switches on porches as warnings to anyone they considered immoral. And when new chapters formed in neighboring counties, particularly Christian County, they started wearing masks, black hoods with painted white faces and stuffed fabric horns on top. They wanted to look like devils. They succeeded. The Bald Knobbers saw themselves as righteous enforcers of God's law. Their enemies, the anti-Bald Knobbers, mostly Confederate veterans, saw them as murderous thugs in costume. The 2 sides went to war. Homes were burned. Men were shot in their fields. A 17-year-old Bald Knobber named Billy Walker murdered an innocent family, and the authorities hanged him alongside his father and another member in the region's only triple execution. The governor of Missouri finally had to send in the state militia to make it stop. The violence faded. The isolation didn't. For the next half-century, the Ozarks stayed cut off from mainstream America. And in that isolation, something strange flourished. A folk magic tradition rooted in Scots-Irish superstition, blended with frontier Christianity, and whispered from generation to generation. A researcher named Vance Randolph lived among the hill people for 2 decades before they trusted him enough to document it. What he found was genuinely unsettling. Rituals performed in family cemeteries at midnight, practices involving renouncing one's faith on the graves of ancestors, healing traditions involving herbs and animal bones that predated anything recognizable as modern medicine. Alongside the magic came the moonshine, cooked in copper stills hidden in caves and hollers, a tradition carried over from Appalachia and perfected in the Ozark dark. The hills were full of secrets, and the people who kept them were not interested in sharing. Then the outside world came anyway. In 1931, the Bagnell Dam was built on the Osage River to create the Lake of the Ozarks, at the time the largest man-made lake in the United States. The problem was people already lived there. Entire farming communities that had existed for generations were told to pack up because their land was about to be underwater. Many of these families lived in a cashless society, growing what they ate and trading with neighbors. They had no lawyers, no political influence, and no way to fight a power company backed by St. Louis money. Some were swindled through land swaps involving already foreclosed properties. The lake filled in. The towns vanished, and a vacation destination was born on top of their graves. The 20th century brought roads, tourists, and eventually Branson, Missouri, which reinvented itself as a country music destination in the 1990s. But it also brought the meth epidemic. By the early 21st century, Arkansas and Missouri had some of the highest rates of methamphetamine lab seizures per capita in the entire country. The same isolation that once protected moonshine operations now sheltered a different kind of cooking. The same poverty that had defined the region for generations made it vulnerable all over again. And yet the Ozarks endure. 60,000 square miles of limestone and stubbornness stretching across 4 states. Springs so clear you can count the pebbles 20 feet down. A musical tradition that runs from 17th century British ballads through bluegrass and into something that sounds like nothing else in America. A people who have been dismissed as hillbillies for so long that most of them stopped caring what outsiders think. The Ozarks have been overlooked, exploited, flooded, and stereotyped. And they're still here. The hills do not care about your opinion, and honestly, neither do the people who live in them. If you want more hidden history like this, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments which place you want uncovered next. As always, we will see you in the past.